Good morning. Welcome back. We're on deck. This is Prep Test 86, Section 1, Logical Reasoning. We'll start with question number 6. The issue is each of the following is true helps to explain the surprising result mentioned by the economists. Except, so 4 of these things will help explain, 1 will not. Okay, so let's see what the surprising result is that we need to explain. Economists. There have been large declines in employment around the globe. So it's not surprising that the number of workers injured on the job has decreased. There's a period there, and okay, it's approachable, I get it. Large decline of employment, not surprising that number of worker injuries has fallen. Next sentence. What is surprising, however, is that the percentage of workers injured on the job has also decreased. So stop for a second. This percent real number thing, it's really it's a factor on the test. So just get that is surprising, because that the percentage of workers injured has decreased is completely separate from the number of workers have decreased. But not only are you saying that the numbers have decreased, now you're saying that the percentage of workers who've been injured has fallen. And why is that? Overall, people who are employed are working fewer hours each day. Well, that does help explain it, right? Because if you're only working 6 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day, you're less likely to be injured. B, a decrease in the demand for products has reduced the pressure on workers to meet production quotas and deadlines. And that help explains it, because now you would infer that in the absence of deadlines, workers are less likely to have to rush, and rush would correlate with a greater likelihood of injury. C, some of the most dangerous industries have had especially big declines in employment. Well, that would also help explain the percentage drop, because a higher percentage of injuries would have occurred in that category, and they are not presently working, and so that does help explain. D, there has been a general decline in the resources devoted to workplace safety. Well, that does not help explain. That would, if anything, that would suggest that the injury rate would go up, not down. So D is the answer. I'd be out of here on D. Let's see what E says. So E says that inexperienced workers have lost their jobs at higher rates than experienced ones. And again, you would extrapolate or infer that the injury rate among inexperienced workers will be greater than injury rates among more experienced workers. So the answer to number 6 is D for Drusus. Let's take a look at question number 7. Which one of the following is an assumption that would allow the conclusion to be properly drawn? And just to restate this, right, when you're working on assumption issues, you're validating the conclusion. So if you're trying to solve an assumption issue and you haven't identified the argument's conclusion, it's going to be really hard to get this thing right. So let's see what we have here. Editorial. Animated films appropriate for children are those that are innocently whimsical, mischievous perhaps, but not threatening. Period. Okay. So you're saying animated films, so a group of things, animated films, appropriate for children, another group of things, are innocently whimsical, that's fine. Mischievous, perhaps, but not threatening. Okay. Next sentence. Since new animated films, so we're still animated, since new animated films aimed at adults have dark themes, such as poverty and despair, such films cannot be considered appropriate for children. Well, then all you're doing is, which of course is the argument's conclusion, that they can't be appropriate for children. Well, if they can't be appropriate for children, the first sentence tells us then they can't be threatening. And therefore dark films can't be threatening, and that's going to be the answer. And why are you overthinking this? Okay, so now I'm just looking for dark films are going to be threatening. A, so is the assumption that films that are whimsical and mischievous are not threatening? No. B, is it that films that are appropriate for adults are seldom appropriate for children? Well, that, may be the case in the real world, but there's nothing in this argument about that. C, films that have dark themes are threatening. Now, why in God's name would you not stop at C? C's the answer. D, children enjoy films only if the films include animation. That's not the assumption required for this argument. And E, children do not attend to some details in films aimed at adults. I don't even know what that means. It's critical in this approach. It's critical that where they allow you to form the answer in advance of the answer choices, that's what you do. And then having formed the answer, there's no reason to keep reading past that answer. Where they allow you to do it, they're not always going to allow you to do that, but many times they will. Okay, so 7, the answer is C. Question number 8, the reasoning in the argument is flawed in that it overlooks the possibility. Okay, so here I'm reading for a flaw. Monarch butterflies must contend with single-celled parasites that can cause deformities that interfere with their flight. So you stop for a second, the period there, you stop, you say, okay, I don't care about the single-cell thing, but you're saying that if you're a monarch butterfly, you're going to have to contend with parasites, and those parasites interfere with your ability to fly. Got it. In population of monarch butterflies that have not migrated, as many as 95% are heavily infected by the parasites, okay? While less than 15% of those in migrating populations are infected. Okay, so stop for a second, long sentence there. So when they don't migrate, when the monarch stays home, right, 95% of them are heavily infected, but those monarchs who fly away and migrate, only 15% of those are infected. Got it? Where do we go with this? So now we're coming to the conclusion. This shows that migrating allows monarch butterflies to avoid these parasites. Now again, you're told it's flawed, so you may read that and say, gee, that makes sense. Well, welcome to law. Remember, it's flawed. So you're saying, well, wait a minute, let me get this conclusion again. The conclusion is this shows, all right, that migrating allows the butterflies to avoid the parasites. Okay, so migrating is the solution. Kabish? That's how in other words, you're advising the butterfly, and the butterfly says, what do I do? And you say to the butterfly, you get your ass out of here, migrate. And then the butterfly can't fly. You say, well, why can't you fly? He says, I've already got the parasite. Oh, that stinks. So the flaw in this is migrating cannot be a solution if the parasite is already present, right? Because you can't fly. So that's what I'm looking for. Let's see what we have here. A, monarch butterflies are unable to detect which areas are free from parasites. Okay, that's not relevant to attacking this conclusion, right? That it's the migrating that saves their butts. B, long migrations are no better protection from parasites than our short migrations. How in God's name, even if you don't come up with a really crystal clear sense of what the answer would be, the IRAC method, that application or analysis, part of it, it just forces you to be able to say, you know what, I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but man, that ain't it. C, populations of monarch butterflies that have not migrated are much larger than migrating populations. You don't know that. You're again here, what they're playing on is if you chose that, you're probably going with the 95% is so much higher than 15% that you're assuming that because it's 95% is a larger number, but percents have nothing to do with numbers. Percents are percents of any given number. The number doesn't matter. 2% of 20 is the same in terms of percentage as 2% of 2 million. It's still 2%. D, Monarch butterflies infected with parasites are typically unable to migrate. That's the answer, right? You're saying, get out, save yourself, get out. But then they can't fly because he's already got the parasite. So D is the answer. E says populations of monarch butterflies tend not to migrate if they have stable food sources. What has that got to do with the benefits of migration? Nothing. So the answer to number 8 is D for Drusus. Number 9. Which one of the following principles, if valid, most justifies the above application of the legal doctrine? So this issue is becoming, I think, more popular over time, at least here as we get to exam 86. So again, let me just get this. So there's going to be a principle below. That's the general statement. That general statement, if valid, is going to justify the application of the principle above. So it's going to let's see what I have above. Okay, here's the doctrine, legal doctrine. The government cannot appropriate private property without offering fair compensation to the property owner. Stop for a second. That's actually correct law. So the principle here, the legal doctrine, is the government cannot appropriate private property without offering fair compensation to the property owner. So the government wants to seize on deck, and I'm the lawful owner on deck, then they would have to compensate me for that seizure. Okay, here's the application, which means the example. If the government institutes a regulation that blocks construction on undeveloped private lots on the shore of Lake Cromwell, thereby diminishing their market value, it must offer fair compensation to the owners of that property. So you stop for a second. The conclusion is these folks are entitled to compensation. Okay. And therefore, whatever's being seized, right, it represents an appropriation, meaning you appropriated, you took away. When you say you cannot appropriate private property, you mean you can't take it, right? So that represents a taking. So here, in our example, this has to represent a taking. So to justify this application that you were saying it represents a taking. So what now represents a taking is when you block construction of undeveloped private property, diminishing its market values. Okay, so let's see what we have here. A government should not implement a regulation on lakeside property that it would not implement on other types of property. That gives me no guidance whatsoever. I have no clue what that means. B, governments must balance the rights of private property holders with the rights of those who value undeveloped wilderness environments. Again, where does this wilderness thing come in? So no, again, you're looking for a broad statement and saying, well, if that broad statement is true, then that application above is a correct application, and it did represent the taking. Okay, C. Regulations that significantly diminish the economic value of a piece of property constitute inappropriation of that property. So I'm going to keep reading again. It's correct. I paused when it says regulations that significantly diminish, where the application was that it diminished. So it's there. I wish the word significantly were not there, but yes, if this is true, regulations that significantly diminish the economic value of a piece of property constitutes an appropriation. If that's the case, so long as we can establish that this particular taking significantly diminished, then we're home. But I would keep reading, because if this were a Yale question, they might come up with something more specific than that. So, D, owners of private property are alone responsible for the economic risks associated with government regulations that affect the use of that property. That's not telling me anything about compensation or taking. E, a government can appropriate private property only if it is a response to a compelling public interest. Well, that may be your view, and that may be a compelling view, but it's not solving the application raised in this example. Because we have I have no information whether it's a compelling public interest or not. So the answer, well, to me, not a perfect answer, but to me, clearly the better answer here is C, the Caligula. Okay, let's try number 10 here. Which one of the following most logically completes the argument? Okay. When a bird flies, powerful forces converge on its shoulder joints. Okay. I'm just stopping. I mean, this is the way you need to read. You need to read textually, process the information, give your brain a chance. Okay. All right, so there are powerful forces converging in the shoulder joints. The bird's wings must be kept stable during flight, which cannot happen unless something balances these forces. Okay, so now you have this tension between stability and these forces, right? You got to have the wings have to be stable in the face of these forces. Okay. The only structure in the birds capable of balancing them is a ligament that connects the wing to the shoulder joint. So stop there. Okay, so this ligament is what balances it, right? So you have the wings, right? They need to be stable, and then they refer me to this ligament. The only structure in the birds capable of balancing these forces is the ligament. So that ligament is helping keep the bird stable. Okay, so any final sentence. So that ligament must be whatever helps keep the bird stable. So let's read it here. A, so that ligament must be the only structure that is indispensable to the bird flight. But the only structure? Only? Oh, go away. No. B, the reason that a bird's wings must be kept stable during flight. The reason? Does it represent the reason that a bird's wings must be kept stable? So B is really kind of interesting because it's got much of the correct answer in it, which is it's keeping the stability during flight. But does it have to be the reason that a bird's wings must be kept stable? The reasons may have to do with aerodynamics. So again, the test, I so see how, at least I think I see how somebody could pick B and think it was the answer. C, so the ligament must be the sole connection between the wing and the shoulder. Again, that word sole, just like the word only, it need not be the only or the sole. So D says, so the ligament must be the source of the powerful forces that converge on the shoulder joint, the source of the forces of the wind. And E, so that ligament must be the means by which a bird stabilizes its wings during flight. And if you look at the difference between E and B, it is the means, not the reason. It is the means by which a bird stabilizes its wing during flight. So, to answer question number 10 is E for Euphrates. We'll hold there.